You're live, but we're tight.
Welcome, welcome. You listen to 360 Info. I'm your host, Antonio. To manipulate history is to manipulate consciousness. And to manipulate consciousness is to manipulate possibilities. And to manipulate possibilities is to manipulate power. Welcome, welcome to the show. Got a great show for you today in Cleveland. I see the sun is shining. I think we're going to reach a high somewhere around 70, mid 70s, and that's okay. That's good. That's good weather. But I definitely want to remind you and encourage you to come on out to our Juneteenth ball at the lovely Mediterranean on the 23rd. This next Sunday, actually, next Sunday from 6 to 8. Come and get your tickets and support, and come down and break bread with us, y'all. We're gonna have some West African cuisine there, so you get a chance to enjoy fellowship with like-minded brothers and sisters who are not as scared to promote and be a part of their culture. So it's a touch and taste of Africa. Come on out. This is our second annual. Definitely, you need to be in the place. And of course, we're celebrating, Juneteenth as well. And we're gonna be giving out prizes to the best dressed male, female, and the best dressed couple. So come on out there. We need you. And also on the 29th, we got Carlos Jones heading up our Juneteenth celebration, emoji celebration downtown Cleveland. We're gonna be with a parade. We're gonna step off 11:30 at 16th in Lakeside, and we're gonna end at the Mall C right next to City Hall. And gonna have some African drumming. The Earl of Pearl Blues Band's gonna be there, and of course Carlos Jones. And we may be opening up with our good brother Steve Boyd with the Hugh people. So come on down and be a part of it. You want tickets? You want to enjoy, you want to vent, you can give me a call, 216-323-6155, 323-6155. It's the original Juneteenth parade and festival downtown. Okay, we've been doing it before we got permission from our good people in this country to celebrate Juneteenth. We've been celebrating it for quite a while. So come on out and be a part of the original Juneteenth parade and festival that's going to be downtown. In the remote studio, we got our good brother Vince. What's going on?
Man, there's a lot going on, and I probably don't have enough time to put all the details out there. But I will tell you that we're going to have an open mic at Larchmere Arts this evening at 6 o'clock. So come on through if you got a song you want to sing. We might not be able to do the music for you, but you can sing a cappella. If you got some poetry, spoken word, you want to do that, come on through. We're just going to ask for a love offering tonight. Nothing official. Just want to take this time to gather and commune in terms of the talents that are in the Cleveland area. Also, I want to let you know that tickets are on sale for the Border Light Festival. I'm going to be doing a one-person show on the 25th, 26th, and 27th of July. So you can get your tickets by going to the website. I'll be sharing that information on all of the social media platforms that I'm involved in. So stay tuned for that. So much going on. I can't even get it all out, but definitely want you to know about those things. I'm going to be showing the Winston Willis film that I did and the poem that goes along with it, along with some original music and poetry on that date. So you definitely want to be a part of that. And as other things come to mind, we'll share those with you as the show progresses. We have, as Brother Antonio said, we have a great show today because one of my dearest friends, brothers, compatriots, Jegnas, I'm gonna say he's a Jegna because he inspired me to be a poet. I fully embraced it as a result of coming into his realm. His name is Mwatabu Okantah. He is the chair of the Department of Africana Studies at Kent State University. He has a BA in English and African Studies from Kent State University, and he has a Master of Arts degree in creative writing from the City College of New York. He is the author of Gorilla Dread Poetry for the Heart and Mind. That was back in 2019. Sheikh Anta Joe Poem for the Living, a limited trilingual edition in English, French, and Wolof. And he has a brand new book that we're going to talk about today. It is A Black Voice in the Wilderness. Welcome to 360 Info Network, my good friend and dear brother, Mwatabu Okantah. How you doing today, bro?
All is well, and it's always good to be here with you and my brother Antonio. Yes, let's bring some black light to the people.
All right, all right.
Okay. So folks may or may not know that we've also been musical collaborators, and I've really been blessed to stand in some big shoes because Eric Gould is a monster of the piano. And when he had to leave to go to Berkeley, Brother Okantah asked me if I would step in for him, and it has been a joy to provide music for his words. He also does work with the Cavani String Quartet, and it is just amazing, whether it's classical music, whether it's Afro beats, African music, whether it's whatever it is, when those words and that music is juxtaposed, it is magic. So I'm really blessed and privileged to be able to call him my brother. So Brother Okantah, you have written a new book. I've actually taken the time to read some of it. Wasn't able to read all of it in one night, but I noticed a couple of things. First of all, you have written some short poems, which is kind of unusual, but even in their brevity, they are profound because you're speaking to certain realities that need to be in the mind space of our people. So what was your motivation? What prompted you to write this book? And tell us more about the poetry and the essays that are in it.
Well, it begins, and we were talking about this earlier. Back in 2019, I took a sabbatical from the university. And during the sabbatical, my wife and I went to Ghana. We were there for about 6 weeks. And while I was there, I launched a blog. And it had come to my attention. I had been made to realize, we live in a time when if we have something to say, we can create our own space to say it. And so I created a blog partially in response to being questioned about things that are going on in our world, in our time. And if I might shed insight or provide some direction, answer questions, that kind of thing. And so I began the blog where I would publish and post my new poetry, and more importantly, publish commentaries, prose, because everybody doesn't necessarily read or respond to poetry. And again, that was in 2019. And then I looked up last year and I had enough material that I could pull together into a book. And so I contacted my publisher and let him know, and he was open to the idea. And so that's really how it came about. And once again, it's my way of participating in what's going on in the world, what's going on with our people, trying to provide information to our people because we just need it. We need it.
Yes. So what are the themes that you are dealing with in terms of the subject matter?
One of the interesting things about this book for me, and it's amusing to me. I remember when I was an undergraduate and I was in the writing program at Kent in the English department. And I had an instructor ask me if I only wrote for Black people. And I remember my response was not if I only wrote for Black people, but if I only wrote about Black people. And my response to her was, well, did James Joyce write about people other than the Irish? What do writers do? And I think we're living in a time now, and for me, Donald Trump is a symbol of it, where the white people who profess to not be racist, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, it's just time for them to stand up. It's time for white people to stand up and to deal with each other. And that's kind of a theme that runs through this book. But another theme that runs through the book is that we as Black people here in the United States, we have to learn how to appreciate our own diversity. We have to learn how to appreciate and communicate with each other, how to learn how to protect each other, and to realize that we are part of a global community of African people. And that as dire as things might look, and they are, at the same time, and thematically, the book is driven by this notion that comes from the Ghanaian author Ai Kwai Armah from two of his novels. One is called 2000 Seasons. And in it, he essentially argues that African people were kidnapped and sold into slavery, not so much because of outsiders coming into Africa, but we as African people, when those outsiders came in, we turned away from our own traditions. And so we had a hand in our own enslavement, and that we would descend 1,000 seasons deep into the bowels of slavery, but that there would be a second 1,000 seasons when we would crawl maimed from it. And I truly believe that we are in that second 1,000 seasons crawling maimed from slavery. And the other novel is called The Healers. And in that sense, you know, we are a people in need of healing, psychological healing, physical healing, spiritual healing. And our artist community, you know, we function as healers, you know, so that's all what's going on in this new book.
Okay. And I noticed that you spent quite a bit of time talking about our 45th president. It seems as though we're in a really strange place right now politically. We have one candidate that seems to be, I'll say allegedly, to be correct in terms of journalism, but he seems to be dealing with some cognitive issues. We have another candidate who is now a convicted felon awaiting sentencing. And these are the best choices that we have to be president of the United States as present. Obviously, you take umbrage to the fact that the 45th president is still in the race and is still relevant. What are your thoughts about where we are right now with that, and how we might be facing a future with a convicted felon as our president?
Well, let's, if we go back to the beginning, you know, the United States is the product of a criminal act. You know, African people were kidnapped. That's a capital offense. You know, and for me, there's nothing new about Donald Trump. The mentality that he represents has always existed in this country. And he was just able to come along at a time where he could push the right buttons and capitalize on it, you know. And for those of our people who participate in the system, it's one of the things that Americans don't talk about when they talk about this system is the responsibility or the responsibilities of citizens in a democracy, you know. And, you know, citizens who participate in the democracy are supposed to inform themselves, you know, and if they inform themselves, you know, they can begin to see that things that are happening now, they're not new. I mean, they've happened before. The Supreme Court has made decisions that flies in the face of the so-called founding fathers' principles about democracy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know, we can look at the Dred Scott decision. We can look at Plessy versus Ferguson. You know, so where the Supreme Court was consistent with the thinking of the larger white society in those days. You know, and I just think people need to be aware of those connections if we're going to navigate our way through this time. You know, and I believe we can navigate our way through this time. It is what it is. But if we look at the other historical moments that our people have survived and gone through, I mean, the blueprint for us to keep moving is already there.
Yeah. Well, you know, we talk about the times that we're living in, and it seems in some ways that we're living in the worst of times. But at the same time, there are those who say that we're living in the best of times. And I think it's really a matter of how you perceive the world. I was watching a video yesterday, and it was this young Chinese person playing a bass guitar. And when I think about the level of surveillance and all the crazy stuff that's going on in China that they want to bring to America, I was just thinking about how in the midst of all of that craziness, this young person could be doing what he was doing. Obviously, he wasn't affected by the politics of that country, and he was able to live and be creative in that space. So, you know, just being mindful of the fact that so much of what we think about is controlled by what we receive through the media, how it shapes our perception, how we might even be being programmed. I know this is way out there in terms of conspiracy theory, you know, because you get so much stuff on social media. I was watching video yesterday of this woman who was suggesting that there are nanoparticles in us that come from different places. One of the places, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole because of censorship. Maybe if we were on Rumble, we could talk about it. But you know that nanoparticles could be somehow connected to our biofield, and that they're doing things to affect us in a personal way. I don't really think it's that far-fetched for that to be a reality. But my point is, in spite of all of that, we're still able to do things. You talked about us being the strongest of the strong in an indirect way. All the things that we've been through, and we can still be the ones who are creating things. We invented all that stuff. If you just want to look at the history of African Americans, all the things that we contributed to this society in spite of what we dealt with back then, in spite of Jim Crow, in spite of the ravages of slavery and the impact that it has on us, in spite of the fact that we carry epigenetically the trauma of our forefathers and our foremothers. In spite of all that, somehow we're still here. And so, you know, we can look at the glass as half full or half empty, but no matter what the perspective is, we still continue to exist and we still continue to thrive. I mean, look, you've written all of these books. You've been a faculty member for 33 years. You know, Brother Lynn has been a police officer for all this time. And during all of this time, he's been able to create Umoja festivals and do cultural balls and all of that. So I really do think that this world is what we make it.
Exactly. And that's the point. That's the point. I mean, you know, when I started my blog, it's like I didn't have to call up a publisher. I didn't have to fight with an editor. You know, I didn't have to ask permission. We live in a time, yes, there's all kind of craziness in the social media landscape, while at the same time, we can use it to our advantage. We can use it to provide life-giving, vital information to our people. Because yes, we are still here, and we can still find ways to flourish in spite of all that's going on around us. You know, and to me, that's what touched me so deeply when I read Armand's novel, 2000 Seasons, because I truly see us, we're in those 1,000 seasons crawling, maimed from slavery. But as we crawl out of it, remember, we're crawling maimed from it. So we're carrying wounds, we're carrying scars, we're carrying trauma. But in spite of that, you mentioned the Chinese student making music. Well, if we look at our musical forms, how they have influenced the world, we got serious power going on, and it's I think the responsibility of those of us who see to share that vision that we see. And that's why my book, A Black Voice in the Wilderness. We still in the wilderness, but we can still lead our people out.
Yes. And I have to mention that the young Chinese student was playing our music.
There you go.
So, it's about the influence. I'm also going to mention that if you get a copy of this book, there's a reading list at the end of it. And that book that he just mentioned is one of those books that's on the list. So not only are you getting poetry and essays, you're also getting homework.
Yeah. And look at the three of us, whether it's Hamp, myself, there's and I should have put this in the reading list. There's a novel. It was made into a film back in the 70s called The Spook Who Sat by the Door. Okay, and we spook sitting by the door. It's like my father used to say to me, you got to get your foot in the door. You got to get your foot in the door. And I understood that coming from him and his generation. But my generation, we got a chance to go inside the room. I said, Pop, the room is empty. Ain't nothing in it. I mean, Why can't we create our own house? Why can't we create our own thing? It's like I'm listening to all of this talk about the WNBA and white girl Caitlin Clark and all of that. It's like when Jackie Robinson integrated Major League Baseball, it killed the Negro Leagues. We owned the league. We were the players. We were the owners. We were the managers. We were the vendors. We used to fill up Cleveland Municipal Stadium, Comiskey Park, Yankee Stadium for our
League Park in Cleveland.
And one of the things that people don't talk about with Branch Rickey and him choosing Jackie Robinson, it was also a way of ending this Black business thriving enterprise. Okay, and we really need to become conscious of that. It's like Wynton Marsalis in the jazz documentary that what's his name did. I can't call the filmmaker. But anyway, Wynton was talking about how can we be surprised? We live in white society, so therefore it shouldn't surprise us that white people would choose somebody and call them the king of jazz or the king of rock and roll or the king of swing, because they're in a position to do that, But if we listen to a lot of the people that they put out there that way, Mick Jagger, the Rolling Stones, Paul McCartney, and the Beatles, they never claimed to be the innovators or the creators of that music. They embraced that music and embraced it because they saw genius in the Black creators and the innovators of that music. So they saw genius in us, and it's time for us to see our own genius and to do with it what we will, instead of always being upset with the system that we don't control, but our history has taught us how we can operate within that system and be productive and do what's best for ourselves as a people.
Well, you know, as you say that, I think us being upset is one of the things that neutralizes our effectiveness in addressing the issues. It's being stuck in that fight or flight mentality.
Mhm.
It takes you away from your rational thought. You know, so we can get all upset. You know, we can walk in the streets and carry signs and shout and scream. That does nothing to change the condition. It might amplify the fact that it is what it is, but it doesn't change it, you know. And I think where we have lost our steam as a people has been in disunity. You know, again, going back to the internet, somebody posted something yesterday about something that J. Edgar Hoover said. And he said that the greatest threat to the American country was Black unity.
That's right.
In a sense, that's what he said. So if you look at that and you look at the evidence of it, we're living in a place of disunity because we can't agree as a people to lock arms and move forward to change our condition. It's you know, it's just like the education system. And I think you may have spoken to this in your book, this whole idea of banning critical race theory, taking the truth in history out of the history book. Well, if you're asking someone who has oppressed you for 400 years to tell you the truth and they've been lying to you all this time, why do you think that they would all just change their minds and say, well, we need to tell them the truth? And coming from an oral tradition, we have been the ones who have had to tell ourselves the truth.
Right.
So we can't, and you're in the realm of education, so you're seeing it firsthand. I remember last year we were having conversations about a Senate bill.
Yeah, Senate Bill 83.
Senate Bill 83, you know, and the reality of that is that they are pushing their agenda to keep us away from the truth. So we have to teach ourselves the truth. You know, I'm happy to say that there are brothers like Chike Akua and Akaba Kamene and others who are creating curricula for us to study outside of school systems. Because if we don't teach ourselves, we'll never know the truth because they're not going to tell us.
And you know, in the way I look at the opposition, that opposition is responding to the successes that we've had in the last 50, 60, 70 years in terms of breaking down some of this ignorance, telling our story, being able to do the research, do the scholarship. People like myself, we're at these universities and we're using the very tools that we acquired in the university, but we're using it in a way that they never intended for us to use it. And so the fact that there is a critical race theory, or the fact that there is something that we can call post-traumatic slavery syndrome, you know, our scholars have been doing this serious homework and we've been making inroads. It's like I tell my students, a lot of my students are white. And when the whole Senate bill 83 came out and the opposition to Black studies and our history going around the country, if it were only us as Black people who were learning these things, it wouldn't be a problem. It was a problem because I got 21 students in one of my classes and 16 of them are white students. And I told them all of this going on right now is because they know you are here. They know you are absorbing this information. They know that you want to do something with it, and they cannot stand the idea that we can produce a generation of white kids that are out here rejecting white privilege.
If you're just joining us, you're listening to 360 Info Network on AM 1490 WERE. We are simulcasting on YouTube to my YouTube channel and Brother Hamtonio's The Journey with Hamtonio. You can find us on YouTube. You can also find us on the 360 Info Network Facebook page. And of course, I'm also streaming this to my personal page. Like to encourage you to go to our YouTube channels and like and subscribe. Comment, like, and subscribe. It really helps us. And at some point, we like to get to a point where this show will pay for itself, and it will if you help us with it. It doesn't cost you anything. Just go to the YouTube channel, hit subscribe, and you'll get notifications when we do these broadcasts. And in that way, you know who's on and what's on, and you can stay up to date with what we're doing. Brother Hamtonio, I'm sure that you have been listening intently, and you might have some observations that you want to share or some questions that you might want to ask the professor. So please ask away.
Yeah, you guys covered quite a bit of things, you know, and it's, you know, it's very interesting opposition. You know, we have to take into account that the system has worked hard to get us to where we're at right now. You know, they spent a lot of money, time, induced a lot of violence and everything else in order to get the shape and mold the mindset that Black folks have at this particular time. So we got to understand that. And so, you know, when we talk about Willie Lynch, or we talk about Stockholm syndrome or something to that nature, we know that comes with some psychological effects. Because, you know, I wrote a poem called "We Need an Antidote," because we're sick. There's some mental illness going on that causes you to where some things, you know, because some brothers I get in debates with, they say, well, nobody's stopping you from doing anything. You got all the internet at your fingertips. You got this, right? So, and we not, as Black folks, is not taking advantage of it. Okay. Don't that tell you there's some mental condition going on? If you can walk across the street to free yourself, but yet and still you don't walk across the street to do it, then something is wrong. You know, something conscientiously is wrong. So we talk about it all the time about, you know, they've turned this thing around mentally to where, and we say it jokingly all the time, we're not going to believe it until the man tell us it's so. Brother Okantah can scream to the top of his lungs about some truths, or you too, Vince, but you know, it's going to be looked at with doubtfulness until the man comes on the scene and says. So we ultimately looking for approval, you know, and that's a mental condition. So that's what stagnating all that genius that you talk about, that is bottled up in us as people, you know, because we're looking for approval outside of ourselves. And one of the things, you know, when you talked about Fort number 45 in this country and what he tapped into, the vein that he tapped into, America's always, I gave it this percentage, 35 to 40 some percent of this lynch mob mentality has always been in this country. And you made a point to something that I was putting together, is that what's going to save this country? Those supposedly conscientious Europeans or white people in this country, they're going to have to step up and team up with other folks in order to save this country for themselves, because I'm not sure if they really want those people running this country. So they're going to have to make a decision. A decision is going to have to be made, you know, if they are interested in saving this particular country, you know. So I truly believe, you know, that's what's going to happen. And then lastly, you know, I want our people to think for 1 minute of what we're dealing with, because I really think we truly don't understand who is living amongst us, who we coexisting with. Now, you got people, and I'm leading up to reparations. You know, you got people today still pushing back and have some issues. Now, what kind of mentality of a person is that? We're dealing with some psychological issues to where we don't know where we come from. So you hear people say, I don't know what part of Africa I come from, you know, say, so you have to deal with that psychological issues of not knowing where you are. Even when you came over here, you was disbanded. That's where Memorial Day come from. We started trying to reunite with our family. So look at that trauma. We don't fought in every war or conflict and gave lives to this particular country, you know. They have done all kind of experimentations on us and dogged us out. The Pennis laws, they don't kill us. We couldn't hold any patents. They don't stole all our adventures, all our money, you know what I'm saying? All the things they have done to you physically, psychologically, burnt down your town, killed all your leaders. disbanded you, take the man out the house, you know, did all kind of things. And you still have people that want to argue with you and push back against you about leveling the playing field or being fair.
Can I interrupt you a minute, Hap?
Yes, go ahead.
Everything that you just said is true. But what I've learned, I ain't arguing with them people. You understand what I'm saying? I'm not arguing with those people because they into what they into. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, what I'm saying is we have produced the scholars and the researchers that are giving us insight into not only the nature of the mental, psychological, spiritual illness that is afflicting us as a people, but they're also giving us a way to treat it in our people. You know, we talk about the Wings Academy. We talk about the National Rites of Passage Institute, you know, and those of us who are doing rites of passage quietly in some ways all over this country. We are, you know, we have the tools to get our people out of this mess. It's hard. When somebody says to me, I don't know where in Africa we came from, I understand that. But I can also point them to sources, resources that will give them that information if they in fact want it.
Right.
We can now do DNA analysis through AfricanAncestry.com and pinpoint, you know, on my mother's side, we come from the Tikar people in the Cameroon. And I understand that a lot of our people are hungry for that information. And so my thing is, let me move towards the people that are hungry for this information. I don't have time to be debating with somebody over something that I already know is BS.
And that's the point I'm making. And that was, I was willing in and saying, with all of that, and you still looking for approval from them, they don't told you they ain't got no holler for you at all. Right. So something Dr. Amos Wilson said, you know, stop worrying about them and you change yourself. They have to automatically change because you change. They the way they are because you are the way you are. You know what I'm saying? So change yourself, you would change it. So I'm saying to them for us to wake up and quit looking for approval because they don't showed you for 400 plus years. They ain't got no holler for you. So no reason for you to be, huh?
I said, you're right.
Yeah. So there's no reason for you. They don't showed you over these years, over and over, that they're not going to look out for you. So let's move on. And for me, from a cultural conscientious point of view, for people who's been on the planet forever, we don't solve almost every social issue that come upon over being on the planet for so long. So I'm saying it's a lot of jewels over there. And our ancestors said, you tried everything else, when you gonna try me?
Well, you know, I think we're really dealing with a case of how people have gotten comfortable in their discomfort to a point where they're not really willing to do anything to create any kind of change. You know, we have access to so much information now. I mean, it's like we have issues with turning it off. We can't even walk down the street without staring at our phone the whole time we walk, and we falling and knocking over things and running into people because we're so plugged in, and we're plugged into distraction. You know, I'm looking at this whole Diddy, Jay-Z, Jaguar Wright, you know, Cat Williams, all these things, and you ask people about that and they can tell you all the dirt. They can tell you all the gossip. They know all of that. But when you ask them, what's your African day name? They don't have a clue. That, you know, we talk about things like, and you mentioned rites of passage and those other kinds of things. We're not plugged into those things to even understand the value in them. And, you know, in my own family, I have young people and I'm just looking at them and thinking, wow, if you only had an opportunity to go through a program like that so that you understand what your role, what your purpose is, You know, I've got a nephew that's complaining about doing chores. When I was coming up, you didn't have to tell me to wash the dishes. I knew that was my job. And I also knew that I couldn't complain about it. You know, and part of the reason for that is because I had a level of respect for my mother and father.
And see, and that's culturally, Vince. That's what I'm saying.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Because we are not connected authentically to our culture. We don't have a sense of who we are and how we should be handling ourselves as people. Respect of the elders is a central pillar. We don't throw our elders away. We don't put them in nursing homes. I'm telling you, I did this film about Winston Willis. And what I've come to understand is that there's a separation between Mr. Willis and his family. His children don't even come to visit him. He's in a nursing home. So the closest people to him are the caregivers in the nursing home and not his family. And that's really tragic. I look at my own family. You know, my grandmother suffered from dementia. My godmother, my grandmother's sister suffered from dementia. And we didn't put them into a facility until it was the absolute last resort, because they got to a point where we couldn't take care of them. But
check this out, Vince.
Yeah,
that situation that you just said like that. You know, if we was culturally in tune to what we are, even I think the other week when we talked about, it was some come up about, you know, men not being in the household, and I think what was the brother? That was on Art McCoy's show. I'm sorry, I'm getting shows mixed up. Yeah, but he brought up about parents and dads not being in the house and things like that. You know, if you was culturally sound and your community was sound like that, guess what? That's that village who to raise a child situation right there. You know, somebody, the men on that street, your uncles and everybody else, like we did in the past, Brother Okantah, what you did, you went over there and took care of that boy. You made sure he got some rearing. Like you said, you had the rites of passage things there. Those are foundational things. If we would just look at what our ancestors laid down, it would solve a lot of the social issues that we are dealing with. And Brother Amos Wilson went further to say how a common culture is economics. If our culture say we wear these type of hats right here, guess what? Somebody in our community is making these hats. And guess what? That money is being shared around and passed around in our community. So culture is economics as well. So it would solve a lot of the major issues if we just, but the man had worked so hard for us to turn our back, you know, that to our culture, you know, because it's beneficial to them. It's ugly, they this, it's that, it's this. And even in our churches, you know, they have convinced our pastors not to even look at that. Oh, they worshiping this, they doing this, they doing that. And therefore you got that disconnect, and therefore you are set up for failure.
Yes.
You know, but at the same time, we have pastors like that, and that's true. It's true. But we also have pastors that are hosting Kwanzaa events in their churches. We have pastors that have Black Jesus in their churches. We have pastors that invite people like us to come into their churches to give people this information. So I think both things can be true at the same time. If we were enslaved and colonized for 5 centuries, we're not going to dig our way out of this in a century.
That's true. That's true.
You know, the people that began the construction of the Giza pyramids knew that those pyramids would not be completed in their lifetime. But they also knew that they had to do what they were responsible to do in their lifetime, and we would get there. You know, and I just think, and that comes back to what I'm trying to get at in our book. Healers are amongst us. We're doing this work. And in many instances, we can't advertise the work that we're doing,
True.
while at the same time we continue to have to do it. In other instances, we can advertise the work that we're doing because now we can create our own platforms to do it. So I look at myself at Kent State. I operate in a building that would not exist if Black students did not organize themselves more than 50 years ago to create what is now the Department of Africana Studies. And so I tell students all the time, I'm a part of a generation who dreamed of you having access to these things before you were born. And so now it's your generation's time to protect these things so people coming after you can take advantage of these things.
Yes.
When I was in Ghana in 2019, during the year of the return, I found out that over 2 million of our people from the diaspora went to Ghana during that year and dropped over $1 billion into the Ghanaian economy. And I went to Ghana twice during that year. And it was like the vision of Marcus Garvey was coming into fulfillment, because here I was in Ghana with people of African descent from Canada, from South America, from the Caribbean, from people who were from other parts of Africa. And there we all were in the same space, talking to each other, sharing our stories with each other. And in that sharing, we will be able to see and to experience things that we actually had in common that we didn't think we had in common. It was a very, very powerful moment. And we need to stay in that moment because, again, we're in those 1,000 seasons crawling maimed from this thing that was called slavery and colonialism.
I agree. Yes.
I'm curious, Brother Okantah, based on where you are right now and how you see things unfolding at the university, what do you see as the disconnect on the part of our young people with understanding it and being cognizant of our culture, our African culture?
I think part of the disconnect, and people don't like talking about this, Harold Cruz, in his book, The Crisis of the Negro Intellectual, talked about the devastating impact of integration on our young people. We're dealing with a generation of young people. They have grown up in closer proximity to white people than any other previous generation. They've also grown up in close proximity to children of first and second generation children of immigrants. And I see it when I taught my larger classes. I had a lot of white students, and I would ask them, how many of you have Black friends? They all raised their hands. I then asked my Black students, how many of you have white friends? They all raised their hands. I asked them, how many of you have grown up with children whose families came from Latin America or Africa or whatever, internationally? Most of them raised their hands. And so they just have a different way of looking at what they see going around them today. We've had demonstrations on campus where students were voicing their displeasure with the threat from the legislature that would do away with diversity, equity, and inclusion, that would do away with women's studies, do away with Black studies, etc. And I had Black students, white students, gay students, international students, all in the building, putting together signs for their march, and I told the president of the university he missed a perfect opportunity to connect with his students. And so it's just a different generation. And one of the things that Vince said about how they're all locked into their screens. I mean, it's like, and I talked about this with my own children. One of my daughters recognized the degree to which she was addicted to her phone. And, but to the degree that she recognized it on her own was the important thing. It's one thing for me, her father to say something to her about it. It's another thing for her to have come to that conclusion herself. There's so much stuff coming at this generation of young people. It wasn't coming at us like that in our time. And so I understand how they can be confused, and how they will then end up in my office. It was at the last resort that they finally ended up in the office of the person who other people were telling them was crazy, who other people were telling them, you don't need to be dealing with him. He's all off into that other stuff. But now they end up in my office because it is the only office that they can come where people listen to them and try to empower them to make changes in terms of what it is that they see, and so they're learning how to relate to their elders. Don Freeman used to talk about this all the time. He says, we don't have a young people problem, we have an adult problem. Because young people are seeing adults out here acting an idiot. And so that gives them the impression that that's the way they're supposed to act until they get exposed to something that's different.
Back in the day when I was a student there, I took a class with Dr. Edward W. Crosby, and he talked about the banking concept of education. Fast forward 40 years, and now I'm fully understanding that the world is run by bankers. And then I just look at the educational paradigm. You have some students who are privileged to get the best education that they can possibly get. And of course, they have the resources that enable them to afford that education. But then you have a large number of students that can't afford it, and they end up borrowing money, and they're in debt for the rest of their lives. They pay all that money, or they borrow all that money to get that degree. And then when they graduate, they can't find a job because the jobs aren't there, or maybe they studied something that isn't relevant in terms of employment. So it just seems to be a system that's based on exploitation in large measure. And then on top of everything else, what they get in terms of an education really doesn't serve them, because if they do get a job, they're going to be trained in the system of their employer. So everything that they learned, it's irrelevant. This society was created by geniuses of exploitation. I'm going to leave it right there because we have just a few moments before we conclude the radio broadcast. But it just occurred to me, and it's really been on my mind for the past couple of weeks, how broken this system is and how things need to change. While we have this conversation, Howard University graduated one of the largest graduation classes in its history. So it's not that we're not capable of going through that system, but the real question is, how does the system serve us? And maybe we'll never know, but just an interesting observation. Brother Hamtonio, we got just a couple minutes. I know you need to share some things. And I also want to mention that I didn't say at the top of the broadcast that the Jazz Poets will be at Rudy's Pub next Sunday at 6 o'clock. It's a free show. Y'all come on through and have a good time, and we'll make some music on that night. Hamtonio?
Yeah, again, on the auspice of Juneteenth, we, like I said, we want to keep it, educational, empowering, and informing. So we having our celebrations, and we're sharing information during that time. So, and then we want to make a statement to show our presence. So, the Carter G. Woodson, along with the Inner City Juneteenth Coalition, we put the Juneteenth ball together. Just, it's an educational piece as well. It's about having this African experience. A lot we call ourselves African Americans, but a lot of us haven't even tasted African food before. So that's the purpose of giving you this experience, giving you the opportunity to enjoy in some African flavor, and to be around other people with like minds. So this is the reason for this particular program. And then downtown, we want to make a statement. Everybody else has city programs to where city sponsors the Pride Parade, the Irish Parade, and the Puerto Rican Parade, but they don't sponsor a Juneteenth parade or things like that. So let's go out and make a statement, and we're going to be petitioning for the city to do that for us as well. So I won't be having the difficulty of getting coverage to block streets for African Americans that come downtown and want to celebrate. So we got to do better, y'all. So give me a call for vending and being a part, 216-323-6155.
But that's what makes it happen, my brother. People like you,
yes,
who are doing what you do, and more people come to it. We're getting there. Kent State now has an official Juneteenth festival going on for the third year in a row. And at Kent State, it started with our students who were doing things in the community.
Just a couple of seconds before we conclude the broadcast. Got to big up Tone Harley for producing this program for us via the airwaves. As always, know yourself, love yourself, be yourself, make today your best day. Peace. All right, we're at 12 o'clock and we are off the air on the radio, but we are still live to Facebook and YouTube. So we would like to invite you to like, comment, subscribe, help a brother out, help another brother out, help all of us out. Okantah has a YouTube channel as well. So you can go to his and you can like, comment, and subscribe, and it will help him out as well. I just wanted to big up our brother Gerard, who watches us on YouTube, and he made the comment that capitalism seems to be manipulation in its purest sense. He asks the question, is the system broken or just rigged? And I would have to agree that the system is rigged. In 1913, they created something called the Federal Reserve Bank. The Federal Reserve was the beginning of a system of taxation in America. Federal income tax started back in 1913. Saw a meme about this the other day, and it just really resonated with me. How many times we are taxed? You get your paycheck, you got taxed. You go to the store to buy something, you get taxed. You accumulate wealth over a period of time in your life. And as you have children, Brother Okantah, when you transition, they can be taxed on what you leave them. It's taxed again. It's like at every turn. And this is all systematic. They designed the system so this could happen. And what we have done as a people is we have accepted it because we elect the people who make the decisions to perpetuate the madness that we live through. I don't know that socialism or communism is the answer. As I look at the way things are rolling out, it seems as though some of those things are elements in what we perceive to be a capitalist system. And the evidence of that is what happened in 2020 and 2021. So now we are living in the reality of rampant inflation. They've given themselves permission to raise their credit limit. They eliminated the credit limit so they can make as much money or create as much money as they want to. And the more money they create, the less money is worth. So it's like America could actually become like Zimbabwe. You go into the store to buy a loaf of bread and you got to bring in a wheelbarrow full of money. But I guess the difference is now that we're moving towards this cashless society, you won't have that option anymore because they don't want you to use cash anymore. So going back to the idea that bankers run the world, bankers are running the world, y'all. Don't get it twisted. If you think that that person sitting on Pennsylvania Avenue in that big white building is running things, don't believe it, because the Bank for International Settlements, they're the ones who are making the decisions that are affecting us on a global perspective. Want to shift gears, Brother Okantah, and just talk about Juneteenth for a moment, because we're celebrating Juneteenth, and there are some who talk about the fact that, you know, the Emancipation Proclamation is not what freed us. So on June 19th, you know, 1860, whatever it was, we weren't actually free. I think the date is December 18th that some are bringing to mind. But from your perspective, what is the significance of Juneteenth for us as a community?
I just think it's another opportunity to talk about the history of our community. I mean, most people don't know that the Emancipation Proclamation did not end slavery. You know, it was a political move. It ended slavery in those states that had left the Union. According to its stipulations, if they had put down their arms, they could have come back into the Union with their slaves. Slavery wasn't abolished until the 13th Amendment of the Constitution. And so, obviously, once it was abolished, the former slave owners weren't going to tell our people they was free, you know, but the notion that we were free in what we used to call the grapevine start moving around the country. And so by the time it got to Texas in June, that's when they figured out that they were free. And our people being our people, we created our own holiday to celebrate that. And as Hamp is saying, our people, so it started out there in the Southwest. You know, it wasn't something that was going on in the eastern part of the country, but it's grown in the same way that Kwanzaa has grown. And to me, it wasn't so much that when it became a federal holiday that we were being given permission, a federal holiday, in the same way that at Kent State, Black United students started Black History Month. And on the one hand, I think that Black students were moving in that direction all around the country with the Black student movement. It just happened to have happened at Kent State first, but I think it was going to happen anyway. And then a few years later, Gerald Ford sanctions Black History Month. But the point is, as a people, we were moving towards doing these things. And I think it just becomes an opportunity to have what we call teachable moments for our people. So a lot of people not going to come to Juneteenth or the ball, but for the people who do, our responsibility is to give them that spiritual food, that intellectual food, and then the next time they can bring more people, and it will continue to grow. We have to create our own ceremonies and rituals.
Absolutely, brother. Absolutely, brother.
You know.
Let me interject this, brother Okantah, this to tap into and see where you at on this historically in dealing with our people and dealing with ancestors. Do you think it's all divine? Because our ancestors talked about, you know, what, I might have answered my own question, because you talked about us, this second coming and coming up out that hole, you know, and I think our ancestors kind of prophesied, if I can use that word, to say this second coming may have, as far as our consciousness is concerned. So all these things are, I wonder, in taking place, is it through our ancestors and divine intervention? that is that just the order of things, to where things go up and down, and you know, the pendulum swings, you know, both ways of correspondence or something to that nature, you know what I mean, to where
I would say yes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I studied with an African, Fela Sowande, and he asked us in class one day, I mean, and it blew my mind. He said, what kind of seeds did our ancient African ancestors sow such that we reaped being enslaved, that we reaped being colonized? And the question blew my mind in the sense that it moved me out of a way of thinking that white people simply were responsible for all of our problems. And it made us consider, if it is true that our people created these great African civilizations in Kemet, in Songhai, in Ghana, in Mali, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If it is in fact true that our people were enslaved by Europeans and Arabs precisely because of the skills that we possessed, then what is it about us that we did certain things that made us vulnerable to being conquered? And if we can figure that out, I think it becomes the key to opening the door so that we can free ourselves.
Agree.
And I truly believe that. You know, it's like, you know, we talk about Donald Trump. I had white students in my class this semester, a class called The Black Man. And one of my white students, as we're talking about current events, and he's asking me my opinion of Tim Scott. And I answered his question by asking him, well, what's your opinion of Tim Scott? What do you see? And he said, it appears to me that he's selling out his people. And I said, what you see is true. And the fact that you might be white and you see it, just because you're white doesn't mean that you can't see it, you know, and it is what it is. And that just brings me back to the point that they don't want young white people to have this information that they can see that. But it brings me back to Clarence Thomas. When President Bush nominated Clarence Thomas to sit on the Supreme Court, there were progressive white people that wanted to oppose him, but they couldn't stand out because they didn't want to be accused of being racist. What they needed was Black people to stand up in opposition to Clarence Thomas. And if we had stood up in opposition to Clarence Thomas, we could have put together a coalition that could have kept him off of the Supreme Court. But we had too many people who didn't heed Thurgood Marshall's warning when he told us, when he retired, don't allow them to put somebody in my place simply because they're Black.
You know something, you just reminded me of the dilemma that we faced in the election of Donald Trump, because there were some people who recognized that the greatest threat that he represented was his ability to replace judges and appoint judges.
Right.
And so when that happened, I think it was Brother Michael Imhotep that kind of brought this up in one of the conversations that we had a few weeks back, that he ended up appointing a lot of federal judges, and those judges get in place and they stay there for life.
That's right.
In his presidency, or as a result of his presidency, we also saw Roe v. Wade overturned.
That's right.
You know, so, you know, a lot of people talk about the ineffectiveness of the political system. But I think the issue is we don't fully understand the system and we don't use it to our advantage. So if we were in a position to prevent the installation of Clarence Thomas as a Supreme Court justice, we should have been all hands on deck,
right,
all boots on the ground. And now here we find ourselves in this pivotal situation once again. I attended a fundraiser for Cornel West on this past Monday. And I think one of the things that he talked about was the fact that 62% of the voting population has an ability to change an outcome this year because they are not supporting either candidate as such right now. I seriously doubt that America is ready to elect Cornel West as president of the United States.
Right.
I just don't see them putting another black man in that building in Washington, D.C. anytime soon. And, you know, when you look at the presidency of Barack Obama, you see that it was really more of a symbolic thing than something that would have a significant impact on the lives of black people. The one thing that he did, I'll get to you, bro. The one thing that he did was that healthcare reform that resulted in folks getting a better level or better quality of insurance. But if you look at what he did specifically to address the needs of black people, what he said was a rising tide raises all boats. I'm a president for everybody, not just the president for black people. And I'm sure that white folks were listening to that, and it kind of helped them accept the reality of having melanin at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
Yeah, for sure.
But that
was also, to me, an opportunity for us to teach our people. I mean, if Barack Obama tried to run on a black agenda, he wouldn't have gotten anywhere near the White House.
Come on, say it, brother. Go say it, would you?
Anywhere near the White House. So why am I being distracted with that?
Yeah. 43 other presidents before them, and then you're gonna get all power. No, it ain't gonna happen.
It's up to black people to have our own agenda.
Absolutely.
And it's up to us to understand how we can promote that agenda. There's a role that people who are in these public offices can play, and they should play it. It's just like there are roles that people like myself who have made it in the field of education the way we have. There's a role that we can play, and then there's a role that our activist community outside of the system, there's a role that they can play. And what I learned from Harold Cruz and the crisis of the Negro intellectual is we have not figured out how to pull all of those elements together to make our agenda work for our people.
Just a quick thing on that, Vince.
Attacking people because they might be in this position or in that position. You know, it's like we should have spooks sitting by the door on all levels.
It comes right there. But one thing I wanted to just put a tag on that piece with Cornel West, Brother Vin, because you know, again, in knowing how politics work. Now, actually, we got access to him. Do Cornel West himself really think he has a good chance of winning presidency? You know, I don't know. You know, but we do know how politics work. Because some people run.
He's delusional.
Oh yeah, but check this out, because he ragged on Obama and the black agenda, this, that, and other. It could be something. The point is, sometimes people run for something in order to get a certain amount of following. Now, Brother Biden is losing some of that black vote. Brother Cornel picks up some of the black vote. Some talking has to take place in order for him to bring that black vote back. So that you may be able to get some of your issues across by that. I'm just saying sometimes politics work like that. If they know that you got a good market share of people following you, and I need that 1% or that 2% for something, then that means I have to call you into to the table and talk to you like, okay, what you want. Sometimes politics, well, not sometimes, a lot of times politics works like that.
For me personally, it's all politics.
Yeah. Okay.
But that's on a personal level.
Yes.
For me, the real is, if there are two choices for president, whether we like it or not, they're the two choices. And if you can't figure out what Donald Trump is about, then what is your problem? What is your problem? And to me, that's not to promote a Joe Biden, but those are the only two choices that people got. And so, black folk are moving away from Joe Biden to what? What they moving towards? What is there for them to move towards?
Well, what you're talking about, Brother Lynn, is leverage.
Yes.
I understand that, right.
And if it were possible for that leverage to be effective, but let's just look at history. Let's look at history. When have we ever successfully had any leverage with the Democratic Party to be taken seriously enough to advance our agenda? I don't think it's happened. And secondly, when you look at this two-party system, in our memory, in your lifetime, Brother Okantah, has anyone other than a Republican or a Democrat been elected to the presidency?
Right, you're right.
And the answer is no. So I'm thinking in my head, I really want to have a serious conversation with Dr. West, because it seems to me that his role in this whole scenario is to dilute the vote of the Democrats so that Biden doesn't get all that support, because we know that the leverage that Brother Antonio mentioned won't be successful. And then that opens the door for a convicted felon to retain his seat or to reclaim his seat. So, it's like, well, is somebody giving this man money to go out and entertain us in a political season so that we think that we have an option that we don't? I really felt bad for people who were coming out of their pocket to support this campaign, because you might be able to give him money to help him talk about causes. But if you're talking about causes, but you're not bringing any policy,
right?
You're not bringing us any platforms. You're not giving us anything that we can sink our teeth into that is a solution. Then it's just talk.
And that's the serious political education that our people need. That's the serious political discussion that we need to be engaged in. I mean, in terms of understanding how the system works and how we might be able to influence the system. But again, it all has to begin with, how are we pulling together our own agenda as a people? And in terms of our own agenda as a people, our conscious elected officials, what role can they play? And I put it that way because all of our Black elected officials are not conscious. But our conscious elected officials, what role can they play? At my level, being at a university, our conscious researchers, scholars, educators, what role can we play? And if we come together to pull it together in that way, I think we can make an impact. I'm convinced that we can make an impact.
Yeah, but just like you said, and we always continue to say about platforms like this, about, because images and, some synergy, guys, has to take place. And I'm a true believer too about, what we've been doing ain't working. So evidently we have to do something else. And so we got to come with a different type of strategy in order to inflect. I don't know about jumping into the political realm because I think it's too corrupted, too damaged, and they have worked with that so long, that politicians who come in there with good intentions usually acquiesce it back into the fold and can't get anything done. So we got to come at it with another way of doing it, another approach. So that comes with unlocking some type of consciousness in doing so. And in order to, we know through art, through education, and my thing, and getting some foundational stuff of who you are and what you're about, changes the mindset of people through images. So we got to put more imagery out there that talks about, changing this mindset. I mean, that would assist in changing this mindset for us to do work at this at another approach,
I have to ask this question, just knowing that you have a tremendous affinity to the continent and the history of the continent. We've talked in several shows in the past about what's taking place in Africa. We're looking at what's going on in Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, now Senegal, and we're also witnessing the momentum that is being gained by the BRICS and countries that are interested. And then there's also the influence that Russia and China are having on the continent. What are your thoughts about the direction that they're moving in Africa?
I think they're experiencing the same issues that we're talking about here, dealing with our own people. In my visits to Nigeria, I met Nigerians who were more British than the British. In Ghana, I've met some Ghanaians more British than the British. In Senegal, more French than the French. While at the same time, because I've spent more time in Ghana, I see the impact that we as African Americans, conscious African Americans from the diaspora, are having in that country. There would have been no year of the return observance in 2019 had it not been for the impact of conscious African Americans who now live in Ghana and who've been going back and forth to Ghana since Du Bois was invited by Kwame Nkrumah. And I was in Brazil back in the fall, and once again, the impact that our movement toward consciousness is having there in Brazil. So I just see it as the same struggle. Throughout Africa, their educational systems have been left over to them from the colonial administrations, and so it's not preparing them to create their own system so much as it's preparing them to work in this capitalistic colonial system that exists, that is still controlling African natural resources. And so those of us in the diaspora have the wherewithal to help our people move away from these systems. It's just going to take time.
Well, I'm remembering a little meeting that we had at the University of Cape Coast, and the students were in there, and we're telling them about Afrocentricity and Dr. Molefi Asante, and just making the connection between the energy that African Americans have brought to the understanding of Africans about Pan-Africanism. You talked about the Nigerians being British and the Ghanaians being British. It's like they have to wake up to their own Africanness.
That's right.
Just like we have to wake up to our own Africanness. You talk to one Black person, and you tell them that they're African, they might want to punch you in the mouth.
Right.
Because I ain't no African. It's almost like calling them the N-word.
That's right. It's worse than calling them the N-word.
Yeah. So
in Ghana, I did a lecture at the University of Cape Coast in 2019. And I found out that they call foreigners, they call white people Obruni. And I found out that they were calling Black people Obibini Obruni. And when I talked about this with the students at university, they were shocked that I had found that out. And so I said to them, you need to think about this. You want to call me Obibini Obruni, but your name is Evelyn. Your name is Abraham. You speaking to me in English. Come on now. What are we missing in this picture? You calling me a foreigner, yet you are moving towards the foreigner's consciousness. Why would these people come to your country? Now they are in control of your gold. They're in control of your oil, but you have their language, you have their religion, you have their name. And I understand that some of you ain't trying to hear this, but this is what time it is. You know, when I'm standing in front of my hotel, my first trip to Ghana, and the young brother comes up to me talking about Bob Marley. I said, no, I'm not Bob Marley. He said, you from Jamaica? No, I said, I'm not from Jamaica. He said, where are you from? I said, I'm from the United States. He says, well, what's your name? I says, Okantah. And now he's looking at me strange because it's a Ghanaian name. Mm-hmm. I said, what's your name, brother? He says, Francis. I said, now here we are in our car looking at each other. So he's going to explain to me how his name became Francis. I said, brother, out of all the things I need you to teach me about your country and your society, how your name became Francis is not one of them. I got that straight. I said, I got that straight. I said, what does your grandmama in the village call you? He said, she calls me Kwa. I said, so you born on Thursday? He's shocked that I even had this information. Okay. And so when I'm speaking to students, I'm saying to them, you are at least still connected to the culture. There's still a village that you can go to. There's still elders in the village that you could sit at their feet and allow them to tell you what's happening. And they can tell it to you in Twi. They can tell it to you in Ga. They don't have to speak to you in English, you know? And so you need to reconnect that, you know, because where we're coming from having been totally on the outside of that, where they took our names, they took our language, and we didn't remember these things except in the deeper recesses of our racial memory. But we're coming out of that. So this Afrocentric movement has been about us reclaiming a sense of our heritage. Yeah. And you need to do so as well.
I think it's coming, Brother Okantah, though. I think it's coming. I know. Yeah, because I'm hearing leaders talking about giving away, you know, redoing that whole government structure and going back to traditional ways and all that. So, like you said, it's going to take time to come out that hole, but I see a little spark.
Yeah. You know, also, having been there and witnessed it firsthand, you have a certain level of self-governance among conscious Africans. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking of the village of Atonkwa, and you have a council of elders, and you have a chief, and you have somebody who is in a position to say, this situation needs to be addressed this way. And it's not about having a police officer come in to enforce anything. Right. I can't forget the story about how there was somebody who had stolen some construction materials, and they brought those construction materials through our village, and those who were in the village knew what happened, and they said, well, we don't want to be blamed for this. Right. And they took justice into their own hands, and they dealt with the situation. You didn't need the police to step in. Here in America, we look at the police to being the solution for our insecurity. Here in Cleveland, there's this quest to get to 1,500 police officers so that police officers don't have to work overtime, and they can appropriate the money, I guess, more judiciously. But 54% of Cleveland's budget is for public safety. And what that says to me is that our primary concern is protecting ourselves from each other.
Right. But that's what culture gives you again, because a lot of those other ethnic groups, they handle their own business before they call the police. And that's what a council of elders in our culture, going back, like I said, we have a system in place for solving a lot of the social issues that human beings have, especially of certain ethnic groups, on how to deal with. But because of the system of what happened to us, then we're looking outside of that. And so, yeah, the police, people used to say the police got a purpose of containing us right here and keeping everybody else safe. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but what I get to with respect to police is that they show up after the fact. They didn't prevent what was going to happen from happening. They responded to it. They reacted to it. I was watching something online the other day, and this woman was talking about how she didn't need a man. If she got an issue with protection or safety or whatever, she'll call the police. Well,
right?
You got a man in the house. Somebody come in. He's there to deal with it. You call the police, it's already too late because the damage has been done. What did the police officer do to protect you from the danger that your man is supposed to be there to deal with? We're so delusional in so many ways. We got sisters out here saying that they want a high value man. They want somebody that's making $100,000. They want a 6-figure Negro. How many 6-figure Negroes are there? Not that many. So if you live in your life thinking that at some point this is going to be your reality, and then the other thing is that 6-figure Negro, he doesn't want you, your baggage, the things that you've had to deal with in life, because you're not. And I don't want to use this bringing to the table argument because we'll be all over the place with that. But I guess what I'm getting to is that when you have that traditional situation that involves our culture, that has been a part of who we are for so long, then you are equipped to deal with things because you got a nuclear situation. You got a mother, father, and children. You got respect. That's a constant thread in that. And then you have an ability to deal with things outside of the household because that foundation, that nucleus is strong. When we look at what happened during the 60s and the 70s, when they created this paradigm of the man being better for the family if he was outside of the house and, not being responsible for his family, that's when things kind of fell apart. There was a time when Black people were married more than anybody else. That's not where we are right now. And now we got sisters thinking, oh, well, the only thing a man is good for is, getting me pregnant so that I can have a child.
You started with Atonkwa. Think about to me, Atonkwa village there in the central region in Ghana is a model for the potential for Africans and people of African descent from the diaspora coming together and going forward in the village. You have young people in the village there now who take their own culture more seriously because you have one chief who's an African American, you have a queen mother who's an African American, and the degrees to which they've embraced these traditions, it is leading people in the village to take their traditions more seriously. And it's like the African American component. There is the school that's been built, the boreholes that have been drilled, the kinds of things that we're bringing into the village. And, and we can have that impact in Africa, village by village, village by village, and it's almost, how can some of our women not be caught up in these ideas? Because that's all they've been exposed to.
Yes.
And until we can expose them to the antidote, as Antonio put it, it's like some of our people, we just lost. We just lost until I remember the first time I met Chief Sowande, and it was like his presence was such that it just made me want to know, who is this? I had never been around anybody like that. Okay. And in our case, there are people who just as have been exposed to our presence. It's like, who is this brother Antonio? How you get to be like that? You know, and that's, we become the black light, the healers that are in our community, and we can have an influence. And it's not in terms of what we say, it's how we carry ourselves in the midst of all of this craziness.
Yeah, I wish I had been prepared to share some images of Atonkwa, because I really want to bring home the point that you just made, Brother Okantah. In that village is a school that is named after Gloria Pointer,
right,
who was a daughter of Yvonne Pointer, who was a Cleveland resident. The daughter was murdered. A young boy over on the other side of the world in the country of Ghana somehow connected with that story and reached out to Yvonne Pointer. And the result of that is a preschool in the village of Atonkwa. Much of that school has received the benefit of donations of people from Cleveland and other parts of the United States. That's collaboration between Africans and African Americans. There's a community center in that village. And the very first thing that Dr. Qua David Whitaker was charged with was the creation of that community center. That community center is multi-floored, and it serves the village of Atonkwa and others. You have Muslims, you have Christians using that space. And this is all a result of the connection between Africans from the diaspora and Africans at home. So what you said about that village and it basically amplifying culture is so important, because they're embracing their cultural authenticity, just as we need to embrace our cultural authenticity. Go ahead, Antonio.
Here's the point, and this is funny that I put down on paper. See, and here's something that we need to think about. You know, because of course we need to make this men's, because as Dr. David Wilker always, you know, eloquently put together, that, you know, it's a marriage, perfect marriage made, you know, from what we have and what they have. We both need each other, you know, it's perfect. And so a lot of us think and don't really think about the hardships that we were going through during slavery over here. We don't think about simultaneously, or even before we was brought over here, what was going on over there in Africa. I said, what y'all think that they was chilling at the beach while we were going through our stuff over here? They was going through the same stuff of dealing with colonization and the leaders being killed and the same thing. And so the same situation, like we said, do we think the colonizers, I think one of you guys talked about it earlier, I think it's Brother Khan. Do you think the colonizers, I think, is going to teach you something that's going to liberate you? Do we honestly, come on, critical thinkers out there, do you think they're ever going to give you something that's going to liberate you, take their foot off of your neck? Come on, people. So the same thing with the African brothers over there. They don't know much. When I was up at the slave councils there, a guy was saying him and his wife from there, you know, they lived in America for a little while and coming back. But she said it was a point in time, and there's still a lot of people around the castles. They didn't know what the castles was there for. Right. They didn't know the attraction on why African Americans was coming back and seeing this building. Could you imagine that? I was floored. You know,
that makes complete sense, because they were raised up in,
that's what I'm saying,
colonial,
bro. Yes, that's what I'm saying. That's
educational system.
Yes,
and because of the impact of African Americans, the first time I went to those castles in 1990, I knew more about the castle than the guides that were leading me on the trip. Right. Now those guides are trained They're university trained. Okay, and so our presence has forced them to learn more about that aspect of their own history.
Yes.
Now they take school children into those castles.
Wow.
Teaching that history.
Yes.
And so again, the ignorance and the brainwashing is evident.
Yes.
So we only have to debate about that. Okay. But we can look at the inroads and the influences that we've had to begin to break that thing down. As a result of that year of return in 2019, more African countries are now reaching out to people of African descent in the diaspora. And that's a good thing, you know, and so again, we're crawling maimed from the depths of slavery. But we're coming out of this. We're coming out of this, and they can't stop it. They can't stop it from us coming out of this. We can't stop it, you know. So we just have to continue doing what we do. And I'll end with this. It's like the Million Man March. The Million Man March, I think, gave inspiration to those of us who are operating at the local level. And maybe 20 people might come to your event, or 10 people might come to your meeting. And we get frustrated because we don't see the numbers that we would like to see.
Right.
But when people went to the Million Man March and saw all of their millions, then it put the little work that you're doing in your local community in a better perspective. I think we missed the moment with the Million Man March. That should have been turned into an annual event where we could come from wherever we are in America, sit down with folks, compare notes, and then go back to doing whatever it is we're doing, because people couldn't figure out how we had an Afrocentric school in a place called Akron. You know, so we just have to hold on, keep making a way out of no way, and understand when our ancestors sang, "This little light of mine, I'm gonna make it shine." The light is in us.
Yes.
And we got to make it shine.
Yeah. And you know what, Okantah, that is the perfect illustration of what happens when we are unified. Because on that day, when all those brothers came together, they came from all different perspectives. Right. You know, they put Christianity and Islam and all those other things to the side and say, hey, we're going to be here. You know, and I think that might be the reason why that couldn't happen every year. Because that movement would have been too much.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
The book is A Black Voice in the Wilderness by Mwatabu S. Okantah. It is available on Africa World Press. I want to make sure that everybody knows that you can go to africaworldpressbooks.com to get this book. Now, you can also get it on Amazon. Okay, but Amazon is going to take their cut.
That's right.
And then their cut is usually larger than the other cut.
Right.
So if you want the dollars to end up in Brother Okantah's pocket, go to africaworldpressbooks.com and get this book. There are some essays. I'm going to read through the essays. I know the brother, so I know what's in his heart and on his mind, but I'm going to read it anyway. And there's some great poetry in it, and look forward to Brother Okantah coming to Larchmere Arts to read some of this poetry and do some music with us. We'll have some fellowship. You can come and you can get your copy of the book, and he'll put his name in it and increase the value of it. Okay. So look forward. Yeah, look forward to coming to Larchmere Arts for that. I just want to make another pitch. You know, we're going to do some spoken word at Larchmere Arts this evening. The jazz poets will be at Rudy's Pub next Sunday evening on the 23rd. We're going to be there at the same time that ball that's going to be happening at the Mediterranean, but we'll be done by 9 o'clock. So hopefully I can put on my batakari and I can slide through. Come get some of that African food. But Brother Okantah, it's been a pleasure to have you aboard with us today, and we'll look forward to future conversations. And hang on, because they make some noise in Burkina Faso, and it's the kind of noise that we like here.
Yeah, absolutely. Stirring up the world, man. Indeed.
Any closing comments for us, Brother Okantah?
We just got to keep on keeping on.
Yes. I recall how you used to conclude some of your correspondence, and it was "A luta continua."
Yes, the struggle continues.
The struggle continues.
Yeah. All right.
Brother Antonio, any closing comments?
Yeah, free, like the last poet say, what? Free the mind and the behind will follow.
There you go. All right. Okay. All right. And as always, I say, know yourself, love yourself, be yourself. Make today your absolute best day. Peace, everyone. And I'm going to put links to the documentaries that we produced. I shot some film and some video and whatnot, and you created a couple of documentaries about our experience in Africa. You'll be able to see the village of Atonkwa and the work that we've done. So I'll put links to that in the description for this video. So stay tuned. You'll be getting more culture from Okantah, from Hamtonio, and from Baba Yao Ansa.
There you go.
All right. Peace, everyone.
All right. Peace and love.
Peace, brother.